Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Welcome to this special edition of Profile as we take a look at the Halifax International Security Forum. Now, back in November, for the 16th time, Nova Scotia and Canada played host to this International Security Forum, a gathering of political, military, business, and academic leaders. And the forum itself is unique. Unique in that it examines global security issues through the lens of protecting democracies around the world and enhancing the alliances that strengthen those societies. In 2024, the focus of the forum was once again Ukraine. It was not the only security matter raised, but as we hear from the president of HFX, the organization behind the forum, at this moment in world history, the security of democracies around the world are all tied to victory in Ukraine and pushing back on Russian aggression.
When a superpower, and Russia is a superpower, attacks a smaller neighbor, breaks international law that it is responsible for writing and creating, Russia is saying that the international rules-based order that has kept all of us safe since World War II for 80 years no longer exists, no longer matters, that we've entered a world of might makes right. And it is really important for the future of the world that we demonstrate, that we stay together as democracies to say, no, that's not true. What makes right are rules, our laws, our human rights, our democracy. And so that's really what's at stake. And if Mr. Putin is allowed to get away with taking swaths of Ukrainian territory, it just empowers all the other crinks, I call them the crinks, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, to also, create war.
Which is why it was interesting to hear Taiwan during this forum say, we do not want you to take your foot off the gas pedal when it comes to Ukraine because it has impacts all the way in Taiwan.
Effective deterrence against authoritarian expansionism is fundamental to safeguarding our democracies and maintaining international order. That is why our continued support for Ukraine remains imperative.
I mean, it's one thing if I say it, it's another thing if the leader, and she was leader of Taiwan for 8 years, ending only 6 months ago, when she says it, I mean, this is an island, a democracy, Taiwan, that is absolutely at risk. And for her to connect her security, her democracy's security, with what's going on in Central Europe, it's really important that American and Canadian and European strategists and political leaders hear that.
Important that they hear it, but do they? Do they understand it? You know, because you and I are speaking on the precipice of a new administration in the United States, and that actually internationally creates more questions than provides answers. So what would you say about the resonance of that message in this moment in time, beginning with American officials?
So I already know, Michael, that message was heard loud and clear. We've already got phone calls from folks in Washington, D.C. asking about it. That message and what happens at Halifax, it goes into the calculus for what policymakers do next. You know, our goal here at Halifax essentially is to take people, the decisions they make that affect the lives of millions, even billions of people. And we invite them here and we put them into a whole weekend of gaining new information, having conversations they wouldn't have anywhere else, so that when they go home to Ottawa, Washington, London, Berlin, Brussels, Tokyo, Kiev, they're making decisions that are better informed and better decisions for the people they represent.
Peter Van Praag, the president of HFX. Well, let's pick up on Ukraine because the country is now in its third year of war that Russia began. And while Ukraine has held its ground, it has paid a heavy price for the war in both resources and in blood. Now, the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump has been promising to end the war, but what that means is still unknown. In the meantime, Ukraine fights with restrictions and weaponry that sometimes arrive years after being promised. Matters I discussed in Halifax with Andriy Shevchenko, Ukraine's ambassador to Canada from 2015 to 2020, and these days head of mission in Kyiv for the Ukrainian World Congress. Andriy, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
So I want to begin with the missile system that Canada has now delivered to Ukraine. It's been 2 years in the making, and I appreciate the fact that Ukraine always expresses gratitude for the weapons and military support that Ottawa offers the country. But are you at all frustrated with the timeline that it took 2 years to deliver the missile system?
Well, in this specific case, we know the complexity of this specific deal, and we know some of the reasons that made it slow. Again, we are very grateful for this happening. We badly need that. But overall, as you can imagine, there is a lot of frustration when important decisions are taken this long, especially when it comes to political decisions, because there are technical things that you cannot move faster. You need 9 months to deliver a baby, you know. But when it comes to a political decision, and all you need is just your will, leadership, courage, and when you don't have it, then it's frustrating. Not in this specific case.
Not in this specific case, but you talk about political will, and of course there's been a number of different decisions since the war began that have been taken by allied countries. Do you fear that your allies, as much as they wish Ukraine well, do you fear that your allies do not have the sense of urgency that Ukrainians need them to have?
Sometimes, and we understand it's a very complex matter, so I think there is a growing feeling of urgency, but also there is a growing feeling of complexity of decisions. But here is a fact. If you look at the way we fight the war right now, we have the F-16s, we have the Patriots, we have the Leopards, we have all the 155 artillery systems, but most of those systems, it took us months, sometimes years, to convince our friends, our allies, that we badly need them to survive and to win the war. Just think how different this war could have been if we had all the support, all the weapons that we asked for from the very beginning. I think we would live in a very different situation right now. So having said that, we never take anything for granted. We always look for the proper arguments to take them to our allies, to explain why this is important and why this is a common cause and not just the fight that Ukraine is fighting.
A common cause, in part because when we look at Russia's war effort, in many ways, the sanctions have been imposed on Russia, but because of China's involvement and it's essentially now North Korea's involvement through China, that does complicate the war for Ukraine, does it not?
And we can even continue that line. It's not just the North Korean soldiers that are already in the Ukrainian land, but also we can think about Belarus, we can think about the Red Sea, we can think about the Strait of Taiwan. And when you think of all the events together, I think it's very clear that we see some nations, we see 4 specific nations that coordinate their efforts and they're trying to destabilize the world and they're trying to change the international order. So that's why we should finally acknowledge and appreciate the complexity of this situation. It's not just about Ukraine. I think we should really see this as a complex, very complicated situation, and we should take it very seriously.
Yeah, when you talk about the 4 countries, we're talking about China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Absolutely.
Those being the 4 countries that you say are trying to destabilize the world. So that said then, you know, it does raise another issue for me, and that has to do with the American missile system that has been given to Ukraine, the so-called ATACMS, because not only do you have this missile system, you now as a country have permission from the Biden administration to use this American missile system on targets within Russia. How important is it for Ukraine to not only get weapon supplies, but weapon supplies that do not come with conditions?
I think it's critically important. The way this war is unfolding, you've got to use, you cannot fight this fight with just one hand that you have and the other hand behind your back. And in this specific case, I would say it was a very weird and exotic political decision from the very beginning, just to, when you give someone a weapon, but to say you just don't use it the way you should. It took us some time to build trust. I think that's important. It's good that finally we have enough trust and enough confidence in our cooperation that allows us to use those weapons. But again, if you're asking about frustration, if you ask me, could we have done better on this? Yes.
Of course, we're now going to deal with the new administration. Come January 20th, Donald Trump will once again become the U.S. president. He's promising to end the Ukraine war day one. Do you fear that means that your country will be pressured into making territorial concessions?
There is a risk of that, and we should understand that a quick peace would mean bad peace for Ukraine. On the other hand, I think we do believe that with the new administration we can find some good ways how we can move forward. We've dealt with this president in his first term, and we really hope that he might bring some energy into this, some new energy, some new creativity. We need that. No one has a silver bullet how to end this war right now. So we will work with this administration, and we hope this will work well for us.
Do you think it will end in negotiation, or is your hope that he will allow Ukraine to continue to defend itself?
Depends what we mean by negotiation. And you and me, we understand that if we're talking about ceasefire just for the purpose of ceasefire, then it doesn't serve anything good. You just give more time to the Russians to bring more force and more evil on our land. We know that before you go into the negotiation, you should enter with a strong hand. So if you want to see Ukraine and Russia negotiating for a good, proper, sustainable peace, we'd better make sure that Ukraine and the free world goes into this negotiation with full strength, with very strong hand. Then we have a much better chance to get good, sustainable deal. It's not just about ceasefire. It's not just about stopping the shooting. We want sustainable peace. We want to make sure that at least for 20, 30, 40 years, our part of the world, the whole world, can live in peace. We need to make sure that we strip Russia of its attack capabilities. That's our major goal.
Now, it's been noted that we've now passed the 1,000-day mark since this phase of the war began, and of course, many people started measuring it much long before that, when Russia moved into Crimea.
From 2014, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what is your message now? Because there are certain quarters in countries like the United States, like Canada, where people are questioning the amount of money and support being given to Ukraine. What do you say to those people?
Well, we want to see this as an investment into peace and security. If you want to see this peace as a safer place, it's good to invest into Ukraine's victory. If you want to see this world democratic, and our part of the world specifically democratic with good governance, then it's a good idea to invest into Ukraine's victory. We are doing this not just for ourselves. I believe, again, because of this interconnectivity of the wars, of the fighting, of the conflicts around the world, that it's not just about us. It's about really solving this global tension. And I think we are very lucky to have this solidarity with the allies, including Canada. It's very genuine solidarity, it's very genuine support. But also we should understand there are plenty of very pragmatic, practical reasons why we should work together. It's not a waste of money. It's not charity. It's a very good, practical, smart investment into security, into a better world tomorrow.
Andriy Shevchenko, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, Canada has been a big supporter of Ukraine with money and weaponry, but when it comes to military investments, Canada has come under scrutiny, criticized for failing to meet NATO's 2% of GDP commitment and for failing to have a roadmap to deliver that money sooner than 2032. It's an issue I discussed with Canada's Minister for National Defence, Bill Blair. Minister, thank you for the time.
Always a pleasure, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin with Mike Turner, U.S. representative who is, as you know, in Montreal right now, taking part in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And in Montreal, he made some fairly disparaging comments about the Prime Minister, describing the Prime Minister's defense decisions and policies as an example of arrogance. And he also went on to say that countries that don't meet NATO commitments should be facing consequences. I'm wondering what your reaction to that is, and whether or not Canada has essentially alienated our closest ally by taking too long to invest in defense.
I would like not to put the word stock. I don't know that individual, and everybody's entitled to an opinion. But I've been engaged with the United States for a very long time. We work very closely with the current administration, and the Secretary of Defense is a friend and a colleague that we've been working on. And here in Halifax, I've had the opportunity to meet with a very senior delegation of congressional representatives from the United States and very senior senators. We've been able to have very good and frank conversations, and they're also expressing concern about Canada's burden sharing in both continental defense between Canada and the United States, and in fulfillment of our other obligations to NATO and in the Indo-Pacific. I've been able to assure them directly. Canada understands its obligations. We have made a commitment to meet the spending threshold and the commitment of NATO, but even beyond that, the conversation has to go beyond just a conversation about how much money needs to be spent. They're pushing on an open door. The answer is yes, we know how much we've got to spend. But the conversation now has to evolve into what are we spending it on? What capabilities do we have to acquire? How do we make sure that we do that in an alignment with our closest allies? That work is taking place, and I would invite that representative, to take a look at the work we're doing, for example, in NORAD modernization. It's an enormous commitment of both our countries, the United States and Canada, together to work collaboratively, to invest in new technologies, to create new capabilities that are absolutely essential in the defense of our continent. There's also, I think, an important acknowledgement that much of the work that we have to do in defense requires the acquisition of capabilities for which we have to work with the United States. I've been meeting with congressional leaders here and with the existing administration. I anticipate I'll be meeting with the incoming administration on how we can work better together to get that job done. Canada understands the need to invest in defense. Canadians understand the need to invest in defense. We are going to do that, but we want to make sure that we get good value for those investments.
Making sure you get value, trying to decide where the dollars go to. So I'm wondering what your behind the door conversations were like with Senator Tim Reich, because here he is in Halifax saying to an open plenary that Donald Trump would find it laughable, would guffaw at the timeline this country has set for meeting the NATO targets. Did you respond to that to him in any way?
Senator Reich is frankly, he's somebody that we worked with for a very long time. He understands Canada's relationship with the United States. He's a border senator himself. He understands the value of that relationship. I took from the senator's remarks that he was just trying to continue to encourage us to do what is required, and I was able to assure him, we've heard that. I came before this forum last year, and I made a very conscious decision to speak to our American friends and all of our international partners and to Canadians in acknowledging we needed to do more, that we needed to spend more, we needed to acquire new capabilities. We've come forward with our new defense policy, our spring budget. We came forward with a plan with timelines. Those timelines are predicated on how long it takes to build the ships and the submarines, to buy and acquire the planes, to train personnel to be sailors and marine techs and pilots and aircraft maintenance crews. All of that work takes time and investment of large numbers of dollars. I've asked and I want to accelerate that. We want to deliver on that faster because the world that we're living in requires that we be ready sooner. So I've gone to our allies, and particularly the United States, and work with me, help us here. I want to work with industry as well, and I've had a number of meetings, with large and small military industrial industries. How can we do business better together to deliver on those promises?
So do you have a sense that the timelines will be shortened, the fact that you can deliver faster than the deadline originally set by your policy?
I think with the help of industry, with the help of our American partners who are our closest ally, even with the help of other international partners such as Germany and Norway and Korea and Sweden, we've been having conversations with those countries and with their industries. We know we have a strong sense of urgency on what needs to be done. We think it can be done better, more efficiently, and produce a better result for Canadians and our national defense by doing it more collaboratively. I believe that the current world environment demands that we accelerate the delivery of those capabilities as quickly as possible, and I believe there's real opportunity to do that. Frankly, I think it's important to think of the dollars that Canada will invest in our national defense and in global security. Creates a real opportunity for us to build stronger partnerships with industry, stronger partnerships with our allies, and demonstrate, as Canada always has, that we are committed to those alliances, and Canada always steps up to do its part.
You know, I've been listening to you throughout this weekend here in Halifax, and it is clear that you have a sense of urgency about trying to deliver your Arctic strategy on equipment. Is that urgency, that sense of it, shared by your government, though? Is that shared by the Prime Minister?
Yes, it is. And it's shared by, certainly with my Prime Minister, certainly with my government, but most importantly, I think it's now becoming increasingly shared by Canadians who understand the environment, understand this responsibility, and I've been very encouraged by the strong support we're receiving right across this country. And it's not political, it's bipartisan, it's more of a national consensus that we need to do more. I want to be really clear. The need to spend more is not in response to the critics. Frankly, there are always critics. It's in response to our national interest. The investment that we need to make in our security is directly tied to our future prosperity. And so I have to feel a sense of urgency because the world is changing and we are responding to that new environment. But it's also because I want to be able to assure our future prosperity. So these are investments in Canada's future. I think Canadians understand that, and I believe there's a strong consensus in this country. It's the right thing to do, and we're going to put our head down and get it done.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you use the word nonpartisan because, I think about the timeline. Whenever it may be, within the calendar year, there will be an election. Earlier, sooner, later, don't know. Who will be in government, we don't know. But how do you ensure that the policies that you put in place today, the priorities that you put in place today for national defense actually has legacy beyond the year that remains for your government?
Well, and first of all, for my government, we are absolutely and unwaveringly committed to getting this job done. But it's one of the reasons that I've tried very hard over the last year and a half to have a conversation with Canadians, have a conversations with our allies, even open us up to a certain amount of criticism, because the critics will always rise to the bait. When you say you need to do better, out they come. But the conversation, the important conversation, was with Canadians. It was with them talking not just about the need to spend more money, but what we needed to spend it on and why. In our defense policy update that we released in April, we tried to tell Canada's story. We tried to talk about our responsibility to our country, to our continent, to our north, to the Arctic, to the people that live there, to all Canadians. I believe that story has resonated with Canadians, and I believe that there's a growing appreciation for the need to do more. And that's the thing that gives me hope and confidence for the future. Because no future government can ignore the overwhelming consensus and will of Canadian people. And so if Canadians think this is the right thing to do, any future government, mine or another, will have to deliver on what Canadians require of us.
Mr. Bill Blair, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. As I noted in my conversation with Minister Blair, some American politicians have been very critical, even insulting, of Canada's military investments. But I also had the chance to speak with U.S. Senator Tim Kaine in Halifax, a member of both the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee. The senator says not every American politician is as critical, but they do see a very clear role for Canada in both continental and global defense. Senator, thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Great to be with you.
I want to begin with the criticism that Canada is hearing from certain American politicians who are criticizing Canada's defense investment, talking about potential consequences. How seriously should Canadians be listening to that message?
I think, criticism, some criticize, some urge and encourage, and maybe I'm a little more on the diplomatic side. A number of years ago, only 3 of the NATO nations were meeting their 2% of their GDP into defense spending. President Trump, when he was president, really pushed that. And then, frankly, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has also been a moment of clarity. And so now we're well into the mid-20s in nations that are meeting their 2%. Canada is not yet there, but we heard loud and clear from the defense minister that we're going to get there. And the commitment that was made by the Prime Minister and others is Canada would be there by 2032, but even sooner if some things happen. And we had very candid discussions with the Defense Minister about, for example, if our acquisition processes, either in Canada or in the United States, are very slow, it's hard to get to the 2% level soon if everything that you're ordering is going to be delivered 4 or 5 years from now. And so we talked about acquisition challenges, but we also talked about the reasons for Canada to get to that minimum of 2%, which is certainly the global battle between democracies and autocracies. And Canada is such a wonderful member of the democracy team, but also new challenges that Canada and North America face in the Arctic, for example. And I think those everyday challenges are no longer theoretical. They really are everyday challenges. And so, you know, I think we all need to step up and do more. And we heard very positive messages from the Canadian officials that we dialogued with this weekend about that.
You mentioned the Arctic, and of course the updated defense policy here in Canada has a very much Arctic northern focus. Is that where the United States believes Canada needs to show its expertise?
Canada has an expertise more than we do. I mean, I think there are things we can do together. But that's when you look at something like a NATO alliance, everybody has their value add. Everybody has something strategic that they bring to the table. NATO's growth to include Sweden and Finland. You know, Sweden, very capable military. Finland, very capable military. Real understanding for Russian behavior. When we grow NATO, everybody's bringing their value add to the table, and we definitely view one of Canada's main value adds is this expertise in the Arctic. Which is going to be to the good not only of Canada, but of all NATO allies and all democracies.
You know, it was interesting to hear the former president of Taiwan address the forum yesterday, because I think it might surprise people to hear her commitment and her belief that despite the security challenges that Taiwan faces over the horizon, the battle against Ukraine must not be abandoned, because it will have an impact on what happens in the South China Sea, and in particular the Strait of Taiwan. The Biden administration has been very concerted about shoring up democratic allies in the South Pacific, in the South China Sea. There is now a new incoming administration. Questions as to whether or not the United States, along with countries like Canada, will traverse the Taiwan Strait to keep the argument of international waters. What's your feeling on that? Is Taiwan at risk with the new administration?
I wouldn't say at risk, but I will say it's a little bit early to tell. You know, the Biden administration in forging the AUKUS partnership, and I played a key role in that as a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committee. AUKUS, the Quad, the renewed rapprochement really between the Republic of Korea and Japan, all of these things are parts of a network of alliances in the Indo-Pacific to try to provide support for allies, including Taiwan, and provide a deterrence to Chinese aggression. What will the Trump administration's approach to this be? One signal that's positive is the nomination of Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State, because Senator Rubio has been very forward-leaning on concerns about China, but also support for Taiwan, support for alliances like AUKUS, and so that he will be the Trump administration's chief diplomat, and I'm confident he'll be confirmed easily in the Senate. That is an early positive sign.
An early positive side, but of course, based on the first Trump administration, there can be a high turnover in the Trump cabinet. What type of insecurity does that create?
Well, there can be high turnover, and also some of the other officials being named in the national security space, I'll admit, are a little more head scratchers. We're going to have a tough confirmation hearing on the Secretary of Defense. That's a little bit unusual. The Secretary of Defense is usually a day one confirmation. I think that's not going to be the case in this instance. And then some of the others, you know, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard or some of the Sebastian Gorka, who are being named, not all of whom are Senate confirmable, but as you're trying to read, okay, what are the tea leaves telling you about the direction? There's some mixed evidence, but again, I'm going to not assume the negative. I'm going to look at the positive. And Senator Rubio, I mean, to my way of thinking, not only on issues like China or pro-democracy for Ukraine, pro-NATO. Senator Rubio and I have the bill that we passed a year ago that says no American president can withdraw from NATO, absent a 2/3 vote of the Senate or an act of Congress, really expressing the Article 1 support for NATO. That's a Marco Rubio priority. Marco Rubio will be the first Secretary of State that I have served with who has a real passion around the Americas. You know, I was a missionary in Honduras. I don't think the U.S. pays enough attention in the Americas, and that's Yukon to Patagonia. We go east and west, and we don't pay enough attention in the Americas. Marco Rubio will be a guy who we don't have to wonder where his passions lie. The Americas is his passion. So those are all good early signs, but the devil's in the details, so we have much more to see.
Well, we are watching from this side of the border. I know you have to catch your flight. Senator, thank you for the time.
Yeah, I'm really glad we could do this. Thanks.
So a very clear theme emerges. Canada's allies all pointing to the Arctic as a region where they expect Canada to play a leadership role. But are Canadian forces ready? That's a question I put while in Halifax to Canada's Chief of Defence Staff, General Jenny Carignan. General, thank you for the time.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Now, when you were originally appointed Chief of Defence Staff, and that was just this past summer, you were talking about how Canadian forces have about a 5-year run-up. And I'm wondering if you need to revisit that timeline, because as we see the delegates come together here from many different countries, and we see the situation in Ukraine, the fact that Russia, despite the West aiding Ukraine, continues to attack the country. Do you need to revisit that timeline as to how you can ramp up Canadian forces?
So the timeline is really based on our efforts to go back to our full complement of personnel within the forces. So that's the whole effort behind the recruiting and the onboarding of new personnel. So we want to accomplish that within the next 5 years. But within that 5 year as well, we are going to be integrating new capabilities that are absolutely required for the present, to counter the present threat and for the future one. And of course, we are also working a longer term, the 5 to 10 year horizon, to onboard more capabilities. And this timeline is determined on the assessment of the threat, but also in collaboration with our allies as to making sure that we address the gaps that we have within the alliance.
You talk about ramping up the defense staff, except that when you look at the numbers, you see thousands of people applying, but not everybody actually gets to be trained. What are you actually looking for that only a fraction who step forward actually become a part of Canadian forces?
So it is really, it's a mix, like recruiting is a very complex process because we are dealing with human beings. So within that, some people decide within the process that it's not for them. Sometimes we are not fast enough to exploit the opportunity of having this person in. It's our processes. But also it's the choice of trades. We have 107 different trades within the military, but our new personnel coming in have a broad range of choices. So again, and then some trades require more people and others are already full. So it's the management of our needs as well that is all brought together. But what we are doing currently is streamlining our process. So this fall, and we have already changed many aspects of our processes, our standards, our security screenings. So this is all getting streamlined, and then with modernized medical standards starting in January. So again, recruiting in 2024 are not, we need to change in accordance with today's Canadians.
Need to change. How much of that also is ramping up Canadian Forces' capacity to train new recruits? Do you have the infrastructure to actually train as quickly as you need to get numbers back up?
We do, and you're absolutely right. We need to ensure that our capacity to train all these new recruits coming in is set and ready for that. So the team is currently working at making sure that with the numbers coming in and the trades that are going to be needing training, that the process is streamlined throughout. So you can appreciate that with many different trades, the path to qualification is not the same for everybody. So a mechanic is not the same as an infantry person or as a pilot. So again, it's addressing that with the whole team together. So now It's streamlining that whole process to ensure that we are training our new personnel in the most effective manner.
Effective. I'm also wondering about the skill set, beyond the trades, beyond the capacity to be a part of the new Canadian Forces. There's also an updated defense policy, and that very much has a focus on the Arctic. How does training have to change? Because quite frankly, in terms of how we have trained Canadian Forces, there hasn't really been much of an Arctic focus.
We've always trained for winter warfare. We've always trained with our equipment. We have always collaborated with our rangers in our northern areas, conducting search and rescue. We have regular exercises, Operation Nanook, that is conducted in 4 phases throughout the year, and it is focused on the north. And then preparing reserve units as well as Arctic companies. So,
do you need to intensify that though? Because if the focus is going to change on the Arctic, arguably what you have done needs to be even far more in depth.
So what needs to happen in the Arctic is a permanent presence. So it's airstrips, it's ports, it's support hubs. It's building communities to be able to detect and as well deter some of the threats that we might see happening in the Arctic. So it's not just about what we are doing now, but it's also building the infrastructure in the north to ensure that we can actually operate the new systems. So it's about covering the approaches to the north with various technologies, whether it's ground-based or it's satellites, or so all these systems are going to be coming on board. But again, the training as it is when we're talking about land-based, we're already making lots of progress in that way. But the rest will need to come in the next few years.
So of course we'll watch in the next 3 years. We're also at a point where we are looking at a new administration going into the United States, an administration that is far more vocal of its criticism of Canada's defense spending, investments, commitments. I'm wondering what you've heard about that here at the Halifax Forum.
So the relationship military to military with our colleagues in the United States is extremely stable. So this is what my U.S. colleagues are telling us. We've maintained that relationships for many years, whether it's in NORAD or it's with NATO or in the Indo-Pacific. So the military-to-military relationships are very strong and then will continue because, again, we share the same continent and then we share the defense of and the approaches to Canada and the United States together. So I'm not worried at all about our relationships going forward.
Okay, so you're confident in the relationship. I do want to get some commentary, though, because here in Halifax, we heard a U.S. Senator, James Risch, comment on women in combat roles.
I think it's delusional for anybody to not agree that women in combat creates certain unique situations that have to be dealt with. I think the jury's still out on how to do that.
I'm wondering what your reaction is to it, because beyond you, there were a number of female officers from different countries in that forum reacting to what was said by the senator. What's your reaction to what you heard?
Well, of course, I reacted the next day to make sure that nobody left the forum with the idea that women are a distraction or some kind of social experiment being part of their military in service to their country. So of course I made an intervention to make sure that at least there was a counter argument to what was said. So just wanted to make sure that there was a different view that was.
What is that view?
And the view is that women have been serving in the military for many years, and they have fought for their country for hundreds of years. The thing is that it has always been forgotten. Women have been demobilized after conflicts, and their history as fighters and warriors has been set aside and forgotten. So it's not a social experiment. With 39 years of service in the combat arms, I've risked my life in many operations across the world. I can't believe that we're still having this discussion in 2024. That was my reaction. And when we have women who step into harm's way, they deserve to be recognized for their contribution. So that was the argument. And now, like, I control only what my area of influence is. So this is what I'm focusing on. Our allies and partners can decide how they want to manage the space, but at least I felt it was my responsibility to make the argument.
General, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Now, it might be worthwhile to take a step back and ask why it's even important that the Halifax International Security Forum takes place. Well, that's a question I put to Janice Stein, the founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. She's also one of the people who helped create the forum and now sits on its board of directors. And as we hear from Janice, the importance of this gathering is directly related to the ever-increasing complexity of the security challenges now facing democracies and the technology that's allowing both state and non-state actors to disrupt our freedoms. When you talk about technology and AI, certainly we're already starting to address issues of disinformation, and the distinction being that disinformation is purposefully misleading people rather than people misunderstanding on their own.
It's not misinformation,
Yes.
it's disinformation. It is intentional, right?
It is intentional.
It's part of a battlefield campaign.
And we're seeing that now. Even though you say non-state actors will be involved, right now we are seeing state actors involved in it.
Well, in Canada, what are the biggest sources of disinformation? Russia, Iran, India, and China. And these are all operating in Canada, in our domestic society. So how do we think about this, Michael? Is domestic society in Canada part of the new battlefield space? It actually is.
So when this forum comes together, and this is the 16th time that the Halifax International Forum has come together, really what we're talking about is trying to understand not only the current challenges to democracy, but the future challenges that are coming about. Do you think people understand the critical moment that we're in right now?
I worry that we are not taking the moment seriously enough. And the reason I do worry, Michael, is that these threats are converging and intersecting, right? So it's not only about what happens in a battlefield. It's not only about technology, which is increasingly where the big powers are competing. It's not only our economies, where we are restructuring supply chains. It's not only about a shrinking population, which is going to make military recruitment so much harder. Look what's happening both in Ukraine and in Russia. All these forces are converging at the same time. So I can't over-exaggerate the importance of this moment.
That was Janice Stein. Now, one country that does not underestimate the moment is Kosovo. A young democracy, Kosovo declared its independence from Serbia in 2008 and still has not been recognized by every country in the world. But Kosovo is working to gain that recognition and hoping, like Ukraine, to one day join NATO. All matters I discussed with Kosovo's President, Vjosa Osmani-Sadriou, in Halifax. Madam President, thank you for the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I know that you met with Canadian officials while here in Canada. I'm wondering who you met and what you discussed.
I've had the pleasure of meeting both the foreign minister and the defense minister, but at the same time, we do get to meet a lot with the prime minister in different international summits where we jointly partake. And I have to say that we've been very blessed with the support of Canada every step of the way. Yesterday, we discussed with the foreign minister how we can jointly strengthen Kosovo's international standing. Today, with the defense minister, we announced a new agreement between Kosovo and Canada on military training program, which is going to be excellent because I think our army has so much to learn from Canada. And the training will really help us sophisticate the operational capabilities of our army as a country that really strives to become a member of NATO. So there are so many chapters of cooperation and new ones that we're opening, and at the same time what is important is that we're being able to count on Canada as a country that supports our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, our freedom, as well as our democracy. And there are so many programs that we're jointly working on to make this our everyday reality.
Your everyday reality, and as you say, Canada is supporting Kosovo in many ways, but still not every country has recognized Kosovo. Can you talk to Canadians about the challenge of that and why the international community, in your opinion, needs to recognize the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Kosovo?
As you know, this is a bilateral political decision for each and every country. But let me start by saying that no country has ever lost anything by recognizing Kosovo. Quite the opposite, they've gained a friend, a partner, and an ally, one that they can count on when our joint values are at stake, and one that is giving a helping hand, a contribution, no matter how small, because we are a small country. But it's an important contribution given our experience. Now, politically, legally, as well as historically, Kosovo's independence is a result of the dissolution of Yugoslavia, but most importantly, because the Milosevic regime at that time committed genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity against our people. And the International Court of Justice in 2010 decided that Kosovo's independence is in complete compliance with international law. So no single provision of international law has been violated through Kosovo's independence. So we have kind of the legal stamp from the International Court of Justice, the World Court. We have the political support from democracies around the world. We've proven to be a contributor to peace and stability in the region and beyond, and we're proving to be an important contributor to peacekeeping missions around the world. So Kosovo is here to stay as a sovereign, independent democracy within its current borders, and our independence is absolutely irreversible. It's not going to change. So it's just a matter of time when other nations will take the decision that Canada did just a few days after we declared independence, and we'll join you in making sure that they gain another partner in our joint efforts to deal with common challenges. 117 nations around the world have recognized Kosovo's independence. The rest who have not either have their own domestic political considerations in mind, or they're just geographically far away and we're not really a priority on their table. So as president of the country, I'm traveling across the world to express the will of the people of Kosovo, to explain the arguments behind Kosovo's independence, to showcase that there's absolutely no reason to fear why not to recognize Kosovo independence, but also talk about the negative implications of that non-recognition. Because after all, this is not just about having a seat at the table and a mic at the table through which we speak. It's about the lives of of the people. Just an example, the fact that we're not in the World Health Organization means that we don't have access to so many of the services that would increase the quality of our healthcare. The fact that we're not in Interpol because we lack just a few votes, a few more countries voting in favor, means that our police cannot use the information that police would use in order to stop, let's say, cross-border crime. The fact that we're not in UNESCO means that we cannot increase the level of protection for cultural heritage and so on. So finally, it's the people who are hurt and who are suffering because of this lack of recognition. They are the end beneficiaries of this decision. And I hope Canada will help us send this message across the world.
So that is your hope. I'm wondering then, because the timing of you being here at the Halifax Security Forum is so poignant, in that the challenges of Ukraine, Russia beginning its illegal invasion, the war still continues, many lives lost. I'm wondering, as Europeans in Kosovo, who like Ukraine are not a part of NATO, what impact has the war had on your country, on your people? What fears does it trigger?
Well, first of all, for the people of Kosovo, is a pain relived. When we see, children and suffering and being killed, and women being raped as a tool of war, houses being destroyed, and just indiscriminate attacks against civilians, and the very intention of Russia to destroy the Ukrainian people and to deny their existence, it's so similar, if not identical, to what we had to go through. So it's a pain relived, and for that reason, of course, there are growing concerns, rightly so, even among our allies, not just within the Western Balkans, that Russia might try to have a spillover effect and expand the conflict. Of course, we've been working very closely with NATO to make sure that it doesn't happen, but that doesn't mean that they will not try. And this has led to strengthening our defense capacities so that we can defend ourselves. It has led to more cooperation with allies and partners. But I would say the key to this is membership in NATO, because the history of Europe shows that to be in NATO means to be safe. Russia is going to look at non-NATO territory as a fragile, in terms of security, a fragile territory. So the more of us that join NATO, the less there will be an opportunity for Russia to explore the the possibilities of this fragility. So I think it's so crucial that we get the necessary support to join NATO. And not just Kosovo, but also Ukraine, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and other countries that are like-minded in terms of what NATO represents.
Can I jump in on that, though? Only because, and you know this, there are experts, foreign policy analysts who fear, though, that if Kosovo joins NATO, that it could trigger another Balkan war. What do you say to that concern?
I would say that whoever knows a little bit about the Western Balkans, about its history, and about the security situation there knows that that is absolutely not true.
Why?
Quite the opposite. That's because Serbia would never attack a non-NATO NATO territory. Never. So we already have NATO forces within Kosovo. The presence of NATO in Kosovo has stopped conflicts. For the very first time, as I said earlier, in our history, our region lives in peace. It's because of the presence of NATO, not because of the lack of it. In fact, not being a NATO territory triggers conflicts. It's the exact opposite of what these experts are saying. So, and we're not talking about a nuclear power like Russia, we're talking about Serbia, a country that has waged wars in the past with Milosevic. It has lost all of those wars. Unfortunately, not with that many lessons learned, but they know very well that they would not undertake any action against NATO as such. So having Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina within NATO would mean more peace, as the membership of Albania, North Macedonia, and Montenegro has brought more peace to our region, not less peace. So the exact opposite is true. Kosovo's membership in NATO would absolutely trigger no violence. Quite the opposite. It would be the deterrent to violence.
Before we're done, I want to ask you, because you mentioned the Kosovo War and the suffering that people went through, and you were a child during that war, and now you're the president of your country. Can you talk to us about the journey that you went through from being a witness to war firsthand to now fighting for your country to ensure it has a future?
Going through a war, especially when you're very young, shapes you for the rest of your life. It shapes you as a person, but I would say also as a politician, as a leader, because you can never turn a blind eye to when injustices happen, whether within your own borders or outside. You're always willing to give back, because we did not win the war alone. It was because our allies came to our rescue. Secondly, you understand the power of alliances. You understand how crucial it is who stands with you in those important moments. And thirdly, it teaches you the importance of democracy, because we've known the opposite. And when you know the opposite, when you live through the opposite and you see the suffering and destruction that comes with it, you become more resilient and more, I would say, a proponent of democracy in action and a supporter of democracy in action in your borders and abroad. So it has been a long journey for the people of Kosovo. It's been generation after generation of sacrifice. We have the highest number of children killed per capita of any war in former Yugoslavia. And for me, waking up every day and representing my country, it's not just about dealing with the complexities of, memberships in international organizations and making sure that we work on the economy and so much that is at stake, but it's also about remembering every single moment that any of those children that were killed could have been in my place. They were robbed of that opportunity, so I need to make sure that the people of Kosovo, the young people of Kosovo, future generations, are not robbed of a bright future. And we need to work really, really hard to make sure that a bright future is in front of us, and I'm absolutely optimistic that it is. We have the youngest population in Europe, tech-savvy, brilliant, multilingual, well-educated, who are shining in all areas, from the IT sector to making movies and outstanding music, and really, really making us proud around the world. So today's image of Kosovo is the image of its youth, a youth that is doing an amazing job in representing the best of our nation. But at the same time, we want to send a message that the impact that a country can have internationally should not only be determined by its sheer size or geography, or by its economy alone, but also through the story that it has to tell. And Kosovo does have an important story to tell, one of resilience, of a people that never gave up, no matter how hard the strides, never gave up in fighting for its freedom. And today, of course, we not only live and breathe freedom, but we also make sure that we give a helping hand to all those who need our help in achieving these freedoms.
Madam President, I appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And that is Profile, with a special focus in this episode on the Halifax International Security Forum. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.